Night in Alexandria was never like night anywhere else. Sea wind slid through stone corridors, carrying the taste of salt, the dust of old paper, and the scent of secrets being broken. Picture a narrow room, not grand, not glowing. A room built for decisions, not for comfort. Oil lamps tremble, as if even the flame is afraid. And on a long wooden table lie dozens of manuscripts, thin pages, heavy with fate. Papyrus, parchment, wax seals, threaded bindings. Some of them copied by hands that shook. Some of them carried across deserts in the folds of cloaks. Some of them written by people who knew the cost of writing at all. Men in dark robes stand around the table. They don't need to raise their voices. They don't need to argue like politicians. They only need to do something far more dangerous. Choose. Each text is lifted, opened, judged, then placed down. One stack is kept. One stack is pushed aside, silent as a sentence. Not because it was false, but because if it was read, something would collapse. You can almost hear the room holding its breath. A scribe stands near the wall with ink-black fingers. He watches without permission to speak. He knows his job is to record what survives. And he also knows something else. History is not only written by winners, it is also written by what gets burned. In that stack marked for burning, there is a strange teaching, not about laws, not about sin, not about right and wrong, but about sound. Why some people hear a frequency that others cannot. A tone, a ring, a thread of vibration that doesn't feel like it comes from the outer world at all. They understood. They understood better than anyone that their power depended on one thing. They stood in the middle, between human beings and God, between fear and salvation, between the question and the answer. If someone could receive a signal directly, then what were they for? If the source could be reached without a gatekeeper, what would happen to the gates? So the fire was lit. Not a theatrical fire, not a bonfire in a square. A controlled flame, fed carefully, like a ritual, like a calculation. A scroll is held above it. The edges curl. Ink blackens. Letters that once meant everything turn into smoke, and paper burned. But there was one thing that could not be burned. Frequency. Frequency doesn't live in ink. It lives in people. And sometimes, only sometimes, what is burned on paper survives as a sensation in the body. 16 centuries pass. Empires rise, rot, crumble. Streets change names. Languages die. Temples become museums. Museums become ruins. And still, the signal continues, not as a doctrine, not as an institution, not as a book stamped with approval, as a whisper in the nervous system, as a tone in the quiet, as a pressure behind the forehead at 2:47 a.m., when the world finally stops lying to you with noise. You click on a video, you hear a sentence, and without knowing why, something inside you stands up. Not your opinions, not your personality. Something older. Maybe because you've known this your whole life. You just never had words for it. A tone as thin as a thread. A high ring that appears and disappears. Sometimes in the left ear, sometimes in the right, sometimes like it's centered inside your head where no ear exists at all. You've tried to rationalize it. I'm just tired. You've brushed it off. It's normal. You've rushed for an explanation so you wouldn't have to touch the most unsettling possibility. Something has been trying to reach you, and it doesn't use language. Now, one quiet note. Just once, because we're staying honest. If you ever have ringing that is painful, sudden hearing loss, dizziness, or anything that feels medically urgent, get it checked. That's not fear, that's wisdom. But beyond the medical, beyond the mechanical, there is another layer that people rarely speak about because it doesn't fit in a chart. The layer where meaning hides. Right now, place your hand over your heart. Feel the rhythm. That beat keeps you alive every day. You didn't command it to begin. You don't order it to continue. It simply runs. And that alone should humble you, because your body is already proof that something intelligent moves beneath your conscious control. But sometimes, in the rarest silence, when the world stops shouting, when the night becomes deep enough, another rhythm tries to reach you, a rhythm not made of flesh. In some mystical traditions, the source behind it is called the monad, not a king on a throne, but the ground of all being, the awareness behind awareness, the light before you even name it as light. And if the monad communicates, it wouldn't send letters, it wouldn't send angels, it wouldn't write messages in the clouds. It would send something older than words. Vibration. Words can be twisted, vibration cannot. That's why you can argue with someone for hours and change nothing. But a single note of music can crack the chest open in seconds. That's why a scent can resurrect a whole lifetime without needing to explain itself. That's why silence can feel like a presence. When you finally stop running, some ancient teachers described 3 kinds of people, not to judge, but to observe. There are those who live entirely inside matter. Eat, sleep, work, worry, age. They aren't wrong. They simply never turn around. They move from task to task like a candle in a storm, always protecting the flame from going out, never noticing the sky above them is full of stars. There are those who occasionally touch something else, a sunset that softens the chest, a song that raises goosebumps, a moment of silence that feels too large to explain. But then life pulls them back. Bills, responsibilities, expectations, the constant demand to be normal. And there are those who carry a spark that refuses to go out. Not better, just unable to sleep inside what everyone else calls normal. They sense the emptiness behind the race. They grow tired of games everyone takes seriously, but no one questions. They feel slightly misaligned with the world's machinery, as if they belong to a different layer of reality. If you're still listening, don't rush to label yourself. Just ask, why am I still here? Because that question is a door. And doors are never loud. They don't shout. They wait. There is a way of seeing reality that says this world is full of forces that pull downward. You don't have to believe the names. You only have to recognize the mechanism. When human beings are locked into fear, rage, division, despair, they become easy to steer. They react, they fight, they run, and they forget. They forget the quiet part of themselves that can watch fear without becoming it. They forget the part that can breathe through a storm. They forget the part that doesn't need permission to exist. But when a person returns to clarity, quiet, steady, awake, false things struggle to cling to them. And here is the strange part. If the tone you hear isn't random, then maybe it is doing one simple thing, pulling you out of noise, bringing you back to clarity, not through commands, through a signal. And this is where the story becomes personal. Because the signal never arrives when life is convenient. It arrives when you are on the edge of something, and you didn't even realize you were standing there. A decision you keep postponing, a truth you keep swallowing, a relationship you keep shrinking inside, a path you keep walking because everyone expects you to, even though your soul is limping. And suddenly, the tone comes, like a finger tapping the glass of your awareness. Stop, look, listen. Many people describe 3 forms of this signal, and you can test this for yourself by observing. not worshiping. The first is the awakening signal, a sharp, high tone that arrives suddenly, like a glass bell struck inside your skull. It comes fast, it leaves fast, but it often comes at the exact moment you're thinking something important. Next time it happens, don't push it away. Just note, what was I thinking? What choice was in front of me? Not because the tone is telling you what to do, but because it might be highlighting what is already true beneath your noise. The second is the alignment signal, a softer, steadier tone that appears when you become still. During meditation, prayer, or simply sitting alone long enough without running from yourself. It feels like you've tuned into the right channel, like static drops away. The world doesn't change. You change, and suddenly the world feels less sticky. The third is the activation signal. Not always a sound, sometimes pressure in the ears, the forehead, the crown, a sense of something unlocking. You may not know what is opening, only that it is. And here is a detail people rarely mention. Activation doesn't always feel pleasant. Sometimes it feels like restlessness. Sometimes it feels like sleep breaking apart. Sometimes it feels like your old identity trying to hold the door shut while something larger leans on it from the other side. If you want a simple practice, an experience, not a belief, remember 3 steps. 1. Identity. You are not your role, not your name, not the labels placed on you. You are the one who is aware. Hold that for a few breaths. Feel how that changes everything. Because the moment you remember you are awareness, not the storm, you stop being dragged by every weather system inside your mind. 2. Attunement. When the tone arrives, don't fight it. Don't fear it. Turn your attention toward it the way you would look at a candle flame. Close enough to see it clearly. Gentle enough not to extinguish it. This is subtle, and subtle things require a different kind of strength. Not force. Presence. 3. Declaration. Not asking, not begging, not pleading, only confirming. You can whisper a single sentence, like closing an electrical circuit. I am listening. Or, if you want it stronger, I am the signal. The power isn't in the words. It's in the state behind them, calm, clear, and no longer separate from what lives beneath your thoughts. And now, let's go deeper. Because if this is real as an experience, then it will produce patterns you can track. So here's a quiet experiment. For 1 week, keep a small note in your phone or a piece of paper by your bed. Every time the tone arrives, write 3 things. What time was it? What was I thinking right before it happened? What was I feeling in my body? That's it. No mysticism required. No belief required. Just observation. If there is intelligence in the pattern, you will begin to see it. Because the signal doesn't speak in sentences, it speaks in timing, in placement, in resonance. And then, small things may begin to change. Warmth in the chest, cool clarity across the forehead, tears not from sadness, but from recognition. But the strongest sign isn't a sensation. It's synchronicity. Within a day or 2, you may notice the right person, the right message, the right clue arriving at the right moment, as if life begins answering you in a language that feels strange and familiar. A song lyric you weren't looking for, a random conversation that says exactly what you needed to hear, a name you haven't heard in years appearing twice in the same day, a door opening where you didn't even know there was a hallway. And you might tell yourself, coincidence. Maybe. But even if it is coincidence, notice what it does to you. It wakes you up, and right then, something else appears. Resistance. A voice in your mind says, "This is stupid." It's random. You're imagining things. Go back to normal. Don't fight that voice. Don't hate it. See it for what it is. An old reflex pulling you back to safety. Because normal is comfortable, even when it's killing you slowly. Normal is predictable. Normal is approved. Normal is the life you can explain to strangers at a dinner table. But the signal isn't interested in your dinner table biography. It's interested in your reality. So when resistance comes, try this. Don't argue with it. Don't debate it. Just say, quietly, inside yourself, I see you, and return to the signal. Because if there is one thing that is true, it is this. Frequency does not need your belief to exist. It only needs your attention. Attention is the currency of consciousness. Whatever you give attention to, you feed. Whatever you starve of attention, it weakens. So what are you feeding? Noise or clarity? Tonight, when you lie down, when the city dims, when the noise withdraws, if the tone returns, don't call it a malfunction. Treat it as a small door, a narrow seam of light, and notice how your body responds when you treat it that way. Because annoyance closes doors, curiosity opens them. Now, place your hand on your forehead, not as superstition, but as a physical anchor. Breathe slowly, in through the nose. Hold, out through the mouth. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the world be far away for a moment. And ask a single open question, one you don't need to answer immediately. If this is a signal, what in me is being awakened? Then let the night respond. Not in words, in rhythm, in vibration, in a feeling that arrives before your mind can name it. Because the mind will always arrive late. It will always try to summarize what your deeper self already knows. And sometimes, what you call spiritual is simply this: the courage to stay present long enough for truth to surface. So stay. Stay with the tone. Stay with the breath. Stay with the quiet. And if nothing happens tonight, that doesn't mean nothing is real. Seeds don't explode into trees the moment you look at the soil. They work in silence. They work in darkness. They work when no one is clapping. Tonight, you are not here to prove anything. You are here to listen not only to the sound, but to what the sound does inside you. Does it make you pause? Does it make you soften? Does it make you remember something you can't explain? If yes, then you already have your answer. Not as a concept, as a direction, a pull, a return. And if you want one final gesture to close this simple, grounded, strong, do this. When the tone comes again, whisper, I am listening. I am the signal. Then let your breath be the rest of the sentence. Because the signal doesn't need you to perform. It doesn't need you to impress anyone. It only needs you to stop running long enough to receive. And that is the truth that may have been burned on paper long ago, but never left the human being. Not once, not ever.